Hello, in this video we are going to look at an introduction to variables using Python 3. We'll talk about some broader conceptual pieces with variables in the larger scheme of programming, but we're going to focus specifically on Python 3 in this video. So, to do that we're going to make a new program. At this stage I always recommend making more smaller programs to test out these small ideas, and then you can always go back to them and look at them and modify them as need be. We're going to call this variable introduction. And if you watched my last video, this side panel wasn't here, which is basically your project view, which shows all the different programs and files that are contained within this project. If you want to hide it, you can either select this option here, which kind of pushes it away, or if you double click on the name of the active program you're looking at, it'll go away. You can double click up here to bring it back. I like to hide it because it gives me some more working space. So I'm going to show my line numbers. And let's start off by actually talking about what is a variable. So a variable is a space of memory where a computer can store things. The computer programming language needs to know two things about it. It needs to know the type, and this tells the program how to store the information, and it needs to know the name, because in order to recall that information at a later time, the program needs a way to know what piece of information you're actually trying to call upon. It's important when naming variables to give them names that make sense. It's going to make some programming a lot easier, and it helps when you're sharing code. So in a lot of these examples we'll use single letters, just as simple examples, but as your program gets more complicated, you want to use names that make sense. And we'll look at that more as we continue on in later videos. So let's take a second, let's talk about types. There are lots of different types of variables, and again we're going to talk specifically about Python 3, and we're only going to talk about three types at this stage. We're going to talk about strings, and it's abbreviated str, and it's a collection of characters, so that could be used for words or sentences. We're going to talk about integers, abbreviated int, and those hold any integer value, so that's non-decimal, negative, and positive numerical values, and floats. And floats store decimal numbers, so it can hold all the integers plus any decimal number in between the integer values. So we want to talk about two technical terms, and again, when you're learning to program in any language, you want to ask some key questions, and one of those questions is this a strongly typed language or a weakly typed language? So what a strongly typed language is it's a language where when you declare a variable, you have to tell the programming language what type of information is going to be stored in it. So you have to explicitly state, I'm going to make an integer, and I'm going to call it number, and then I'm going to put a value in there. Java is a strongly typed language. Weakly typed languages, on the other hand, are where you only need to indicate the name of the variable when you create it. The programming language will guess at the type. Now, a lot of times, people like Python as a learning language because it's a weakly typed language. But it doesn't mean that you don't have to keep type in mind. As you continue in your programming, you're going to come across some errors, and that's going to be type issues. So keep this in the back of your mind right now. When you create a variable, Python's going to guess at the type, and you could run into problems where it guesses wrong, and we will see some of those in some later videos. So let's declare some variables. When we declare a variable, we need to take, on the left hand side we're going to put the variable name, and on the right hand side we're going to take the variable type. Sorry, not variable type, we're going to say the variable, we're going to say the initialized value. This is called an assignment statement. So let's make a variable that holds my name. Name equals Paul. So this is going to make a variable box in memory, and it's going to put the value Paul in there. With Python, and let's make another one called name2. We'll call that name1. With Python, you can actually use single or double quotes for strings. It doesn't matter, there is a technical difference, but for our purposes, single or double quotes will work fine. So name2 is Stephanie. Really important, you can't have two variables with the same name, because again, if I want to access that variable, I need to know which one I'm looking for. Now again, I talked about this guessing. Because this is in quotes, Python's going to say you're inside quotes, it's probably a string. So those two variables are both of type string. But if I do num1 and I put the number like 89, what Python sees is it actually sees an integer value here. So it's going to guess integer value. And what that means is that num1 is going to be an integer. Now, if I want to make a float number, I put any number with a decimal. So because Python sees a decimal here, it's going to guess a decimal, or I guess a float value. And for those of you that program in Java, float and double are the same idea. Now, sometimes people will do this. Now, let's imagine that I wanted this to be a float, but it was an actual exact integer value. I can put 45.0, and including the 0.0 indicates that this variable should be a float type. And that's all there is to declaring and initializing variables. The left-hand side stores the name, or the variable name, and the right-hand side stores the value we're going to put in there. In our next video, we're going to look at how to print these out to the screen and use them. Hope that helped.